Yes, say the origin. I thought it was just I can say the week on there. Thank you. That'd be nice. Okay. Where you should be.
Okay, right, let's start. Yeah, I'm told that my voice goes through that. So let's see. Welcome, everyone. And welcome to our session on rapid urbanization and the circular economy. Your copies in your chairs. We have a couple of panelists today. And before we go there, before we go to the panelists, I just wanted to thank some of our members. So Swiss Development Corporation and BMZ on transport, Real on housing, WeGo on waste management. And I just think it just showcases the variety of our network in Cities Alliance. And that's the power of Cities Alliance. It's the network that you and what you bring to the collective in our fight against urban poverty. We have a keynote speaker who's very influential across Africa, empowering youth and entrepreneurship. Ifyinwa Buchukwu is the CEO of the Tony Elumelu Foundation, and she will be online. Donovan Story, who's the head of global policy and influence in Real, and who will be doing some of the moderation of the panel discussion. Matteo Busquet, Acting Director of Thematic Support, Coordination of Policy and Financial Instruments, DG NEAR, from down the road, European Commission. Ruben Wirtschel, thank you very much for coming. He's the Senior Policy Officer for the German Federal Ministry for Economic Cooperation and Development, BMZ. Cedric Demers is the Head of Public Affairs and Government Relations of Holcim, who's on his way, I hope. And then Anna Thurgeonor, who's the Senior Sustainability Consultant of Arab, who's going to do some of the findings of this publication. And virtually, we have Eva Bernard, Principal Gender and Green Economy, European Bank for Reconstruction and Development. And also virtual is Sonia Diaz, Waste Specialist of Women in Formal Employment and Globalizing Organization, which is WeGo, who is again one of our members. So we all know that rapid urbanization, urban poverty, and climate change are some of the major challenges of the 21st century. And cities are where the climate battle will largely be won or lost. And cities are central to the delivery of the climate commitments of the Paris Agreement and the Sustainable Development Goals. And cities, while they're the cause, also need to be the solution, because it's in cities that are the hubs of innovation and where we can make a difference. Cities Alliance has, for the last 2 decades, been supporting cities across Africa, Asia, and Latin America to address sustainable development while supporting inclusive and sustainable growth for all. In the circular economy, we're moving away from take, make, and dispose to resource production, consumption, and environmental impacts with strategies such as sharing, reusing, maintaining, remanufacturing, recycling. And we need to ensure that climate justice for the urban poor is part of the just transition, and people living in urban poverty are not victims, they are agents of change themselves. And at the last COP in Glasgow, we had Slum Dwellers International online talking to COP and saying, and somebody from the slums saying, we have solutions that you may not have thought of. So we need to include the urban poor as agents of change. So with that, I'm going to ask if Yenwa Bogochukwu is she online? Hmm? Oh, the video. Okay, we're doing a video. Thank you. Just for the opening session, and then I'll come to Anna.
Good morning, distinguished guests. It is an absolute pleasure to be here at this roundtable event tagged Rapid Urbanization and the Circular Economy, brought to us by Cities Alliance. And I must commend Cities Alliance for this topic that's coming at such a critical time when the impact of climate change is right on our doorsteps. It's no secret that climate change is not 50 years away, it's yesterday. I say this because all over the world, we are feeling the impact like never before. My home state, for instance, in Nigeria, recently witnessed the death of hundreds from flooding because they were caught unawares and the waters rose to the rooftops in a matter of hours. Some say it's climate change, others say it's dams from neighboring countries. I say hundreds are dead, and it doesn't matter to them which it was. Thousands still have lost their property and livelihood. And again, it is absolutely irrelevant to them why this happened. What's important is that it happened. How can we better prepare and protect the most vulnerable from the impact of the environmental disasters that is decimating communities across the globe today? One might ask, how exactly is the circular economy relevant to this question, and indeed relevant to what we do at the Tony Elumelu Foundation? Well, 100% of what we consume is produced by entrepreneurs, whether they're SMEs or big corporations. Unfortunately, what we consume is using 60% more resources than the earth can actually provide. And most of this ends up as unnecessary waste and contributes largely to climate change. Reversing this trend is therefore critical to all efforts of climate mitigation and climate adaptation, which quite literally will save millions, if not billions, of lives. And this is why transitioning to a circular economy today is widely seen as the way forward and a critical pillar in the solutions to the climate challenge we face today as a globe. According to an article by the World Economic Forum, in a circular economy, things are made and consumed in a way that minimizes our use of the world's resources, cuts waste, and reduces carbon emissions. Products are kept in use for as long as possible through repairing, recycling, and redesign so that they can be used again and again. At the end of a product's life, the material used to make it are kept in the economy and reused wherever possible. The African continent, unlike most of the world, is still on the cusp of widespread industrialization. And it is therefore in the best position to leverage technology that imbibes the circular economy model, in contrast to the linear economy model which has been the hallmark of the world's industrialized nations. At the Tony Elumelu Foundation, entrepreneurship empowerment is the bedrock of what we do, and we have adopted practices to ensure we successfully scale our impact of poverty alleviation, jobs creation, and women empowerment across Africa. This includes a deliberate and well thought out response to the climate change because our main stakeholders, Africa's youth, are the leaders of tomorrow. As such, we're launching a massive climate literacy and awareness campaign which has the circular economy model as one of its major pillars. In 2015, the Tony Elumelu Foundation made a commitment to train and fund 10,000 African entrepreneurs over 10 years across all 54 African countries. 7 years later, we have disbursed an estimated $80 million direct in seed capital to about 15,847 entrepreneurs, with beneficiaries from each of the African countries. Our call to action now is that climate action's foot soldiers and implementers on the African continent are none other than the millions of young, innovative SMEs with brilliant ideas or budding businesses. And all they need from us is a hand up, no longer handouts. This hand up is by way of training, funding, mentoring, and of course, creating an enabling environment. And it takes all players, private sector, public sector. The African narrative is changing, and the climate conversation is the main arena for that change. With billions being mobilized for climate financing, we need to ensure that these funds are being spent where it'll have maximum and immediate impact. And that's in creating a generational mindset shift as well as a lifestyle shift, through training as well as acceleration of SME-led climate adaptation and mitigation responses, such as the circular economy. And so, through our proprietary platform, TF Connect, our entrepreneurs are able to connect, collaborate, and contribute to this agenda to create a thriving circular economy that is crucial to ensure the vast majority of the African continent is prepared and protected from the worst impacts of climate change. Adopting the circular economy model is a transformative approach to entrepreneurship. It will create not just entrepreneurship development, but poverty alleviation, and also make sure that Africa has the unique opportunity, being an emerging economy, to be the poster child for the impact of the circular economy on climate adaptation and poverty alleviation. Indeed, it provides us with the tools to tackle climate change through entrepreneurship empowerment to foster prosperity, job creation, and resilience, while radically reducing greenhouse gas emissions, waste, and pollution. This is the plan. Yes, it's ambitious, but it's not impossible. As the saying goes, only those who are crazy enough to think they can change the world actually do. Thank you.
Good. So Anna played a major role in producing this for us, and Anna of Arab was part of the team of analysts who produced us. So Anna, over to you just to
Thank you very
give
much.
some of the main findings.
Yes. Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Cities Alliance, for having us here today to present the findings. I'm Anna Sturgeon. I'm a senior sustainability consultant at Arup, and I work quite a lot in circular economy, mainly around the built environment, cities and policy, and then more recently I've been working with the international development team around and producing this document. An inspiring presentation just now, and I think all of us know that the time is now to act, and hopefully this document that I'm going to summarize will help increase some action around circular economy, applying the principles, because of course they support mitigating climate change and support bringing people out of poverty in those rapidly urbanizing cities. I'm going to give a bit of a background to the project, and then I will take you through some of the research. But I suppose just to sort of summarize that we all know fast unplanned growth, adding to that increased consumption without the supporting infrastructure will create more emissions, more extraction, and more consumption of materials which generate waste. I'm sure many of you know the term circular economy, but it's a model for production and consumption. So it's looking at a systems change. It's completely rethinking our linear business model and looking at a new way of creating new business models, new policy, new infrastructure that can enable those to have a new approach to businesses, to living. And so that's looking at issues around sharing, the sharing economy, using, reusing, and ideally moving away from recycling. But of course, some of these countries and cities need to have the infrastructure for recycling as a sort of a first stage. But ultimately, we want to ensure that we are keeping those materials in continual cycle and moving away from producing any waste, which will also create healthy environments. And also it needs to be socially inclusive, so supporting a just transition so that those that are part of this journey are brought on board. A statistic that we'll all know, cities account for 85% of global GDP, and also create majority of consumption. So there's a huge opportunity, as we've just heard. So just to summarise the overarching of the document, we looked at climate mitigation and circular economy. As I say, circular economy will support climate mitigation. We looked at the three concepts that you'll be familiar with if you know the Ellen MacArthur Foundation. So the sort of the three buckets of circular economy are reducing, eliminating waste and pollution, circulating products and materials, so we're no longer extracting but keeping those in continual cycle, and then finally protecting and actually regenerating nature, so giving back to nature and improving it. And then climate mitigation, looking at reducing emissions and where necessary carbon capture as well. So we looked at all of those through the lens of the 6 urban systems that you'll see down the left-hand side: solid waste management, housing and construction, energy, water systems, transport and food. And then we summarised each of those sections along looking at why they're important, how we can address those, and then who should play a part in that process. The why, I think we all probably know, but to summarise, to avoid locking in those emissions, so looking to lower emissions, cleaner air, less generation of waste, and then also looking to meet socio-economic development opportunities. So the how, we have presented having an integrated approach to urban planning. So looking at all of the infrastructure systems, and as I said at the beginning, it's about a complete systems rethink. We can't operate in our business as usual approach. We need everybody to rethink how the system works, whether it's policy, whether it's the economics, whether it's our businesses, the overarching city planning as well. The just transition, as I have said, but to reiterate, it needs to be environmentally sustainable, decent work for those that are working, and also social inclusion and eradicating poverty. We need to use circular economy within education and livelihood, so bringing upskilling those that are part of that transition. And as we heard, many of those that are in slums have the solutions already, which is really positive, and they need to be brought along on the journey. And also, as well as being inclusive with those on the ground, it's bringing along national and local governments as well, and also the wider global network. So leading to that, who is important? Everyone needs to be part of that, whether it's local communities, municipalities, also wider NGOs as well, and need to be brought on board so that we have a combined approach to our new systems. So I'm going to take you through each of the 6 urban systems that I identified in the previous slide, and just summarise those findings. You'll see them in the report, but I'll give you a sort of a snapshot, and do feel free to go away and we'll have a discussion afterwards as well. Solid waste management. We feel that there's a huge opportunity to link waste and resource management and bringing in circular economy. In many cases, we know that circular economy is already being lived and applied in some of these rapidly urbanizing cities within slums. They're very often frugal and manage their resources really well. But through formal employment and also through the informal economy, we can ensure that there's a joined up approach to excuse me, resource management. We also need to ensure we reduce waste, so the generation of waste that then has an impact on the environment and also people's health, so within the land, air and water. We think Cities Alliance can build the local capacity for supporting that overarching management and strategic approach through training, supporting those organisations and getting those people supported through waste management. We think that we can, Cities Alliance can continue to work with cities, ensuring that the local administrations are well equipped, have the legislative requirements to ensure that there's an overarching plan for those informal settlements. And then also supporting infrastructure, so having the wider supporting systems, planning available as well. Construction and housing, the statistic there, as you can see, 60 to 80% of the built environment that will be needed in 2050 in Africa is yet to be built. So we need to seize the opportunity right now. We need to be applying these policies. We need to be acting right now. And that's with regards to locking in, for example, carbon, so what we call embodied carbon, and finding opportunities to embed them in the principles within the construction process. Cities Alliance can support from a technical perspective and promoting the use of bio-based materials and low embodied carbon. What we found within the research as well was that there's a really nice link across each of these urban systems. So bringing in bio-based materials from agricultural byproducts and using them for construction. And there's a huge opportunity there that's already happening, but could be managed in an overarching way. Also adapting, bringing in principles around modular design, off-site construction, so investment in some of these business models that are different to some of the approaches that typically in a linear economy would work, but then enable minimizing waste and making the process much more efficient. And then giving stewardship to those on the ground and having an integrated approach, I think would support a transition to a circular economy for housing and construction. So for energy, there's two aspects here. First one, looking to reduce demand, and then secondly, looking at efficient modes of energy generation. So the energy sources can see increased resilience for households, ensuring that there's a continual supply there. So having passive cooling, I think there's examples of really nice examples of biomimicry, which is using nature as an inspiration to bring into building design, for example, that reduce reliance on mechanical ventilation, for example, and air conditioning. Renewable energy initiatives can provide energy security, lower emissions, and then, of course, reduce inequalities. Waste to energy, opportunity there for private investments, and then really promoting the sort of repair and reuse of renewable energy components as well. Again, we think Cities Alliance can promote skills, support the upskilling of those on the ground in terms of renewable energy, ensuring they have the skills to implement those, and promoting non-carbon regenerative cooling processes, as I've mentioned. I think Harare was the shopping centre that I was just thinking of, biomimicry design, and then help build technical investment capacity, so getting those public-private partnerships involved. For water systems, there is an opportunity there through reducing the efficiency of the operation of water use, recovering, so reusing that water in a managed way, looking at biogas from wastewater treatment, and then looking at nature-based solutions. So that's the regeneration of nature. Nature has supported us for billions of years, it's a pretty good system. We should look to use it and manage it in a way that doesn't create waste and pollution, but uses it as part of our process. Cities Alliance, we suggest, can promote local education around water usage, community level catchments, so looking at rainwater harvesting, for example, and promoting technical support, so upskilling and finding those nature-based solutions within the cities. For transport, we've suggested that low carbon active transport can help reduce waste and pollution. Quite often, women are the ones that are out using the public transport in some of these cities. So by supporting the infrastructure in those situations can only be a positive thing. Pairing with nature-based solutions as well, so having green corridors, cycle routes, can support better and more use of that rather than single-use car journeys, which obviously generate waste, pollution and impact air quality for human health. We've also suggested providing planning to support that last mile connectivity between informal settings and the developing areas to start to have a better urban planning system. And then the final one around food, agriculture. As I say, there's all these kind of interconnected issues between all of these urban systems. Cities obviously are rapidly urbanizing and fast growing kind of in terms of commercial opportunities. So we think that there's a great potential for new actors in local government and industry to support farming. As much as 40% of post-harvest consumables, so foods, can be lost due to poor storage. So there's an opportunity there to support farmers in those situations. In industrialized countries, cities, quite often the food is lost during the kind of sale process at the consumer level. So we need to ensure that we support that transition between food loss between the transportation of new cities, and then improving the value chain losses. So having regenerative agriculture, crop grazing rotation, organic fertilizers, so ensuring that there's a support there for farming and managing those processes. So through our research, we found a number of cross-cutting factors, and we've listed them out, summarised them there. And I think, I mean, you can read them for yourself, but generally, spatial planning support for infrastructure, so having an overarching view across all of these urban systems is critical. Skip through a few, but administrative capacity, so having people that are aware and overarching view in terms of policy generation is important. Upskilling, understanding the opportunities with circular economy, thinking about new business models, supporting that through private investment, addressing the bioeconomy, so looking at how biomaterials can move between each of those urban systems. And then finally, what we've done here in the report is to look at, as we heard in the earlier presentation, that there's so many players that form part of this process. And so we've listed those international players, well, those players on the ground and those international organisations, looking at across a number of different areas. So design, innovation, planning, policy, and the darker blue is around where they have a greater influence, and lighter blue, a lesser influence. And I guess where each of you sit along each of those players, there's an opportunity there for you to play a significant part in transitioning towards a circular economy, which can only achieve carbon mitigation. So I think I will leave it there for now. Thank you very much and enjoy.
Thank you, Anna. We're going to go to a panel discussion. A couple of questions that will be frame the discussion. So how can the principles of the circular economy be used to help resolve some of the most pressing issues in cities, including housing, job creation, and food security? In what way is the circular economy a solution for fast-growing secondary cities? And what can we learn from existing local solutions? And how to best support cities to use circular economy approaches to guide future urban expansion and planning. Donovan Story is the head of global policy and influence in Real. And Donovan is going to moderate and facilitate the panel. Donovan, over to you.
Thank you, Greg. Welcome, everyone. Good morning. It's my task to get the best out of the experts that are in the room and online in this session, building upon the great introduction from Anna on the report, and then also leading into the opportunity for you in the audience and also those online to contribute your questions and comments as well. So we've got roughly an hour to be able to do that. You've been introduced to everyone so far. Cedric, you came in just as we were underway, so welcome. You're the head of Public Affairs and Government Relations at Olsen.
Correct.
So welcome. And just online as well, just because it's always really awkward online to not introduce someone. So I'm just going to also introduce Sonia Dias, who's the waste specialist with WeGo, who's joining us as well. And I'll be coming to you soon, Sonia. Pleasure, welcome. So Greg has provided us the guiding questions. I'd really like to, because she's unfortunately wasn't able to be here, but provided a fantastic small video presentation for us. But Yanwa raised, I think, some really interesting points, which I hope to return to as well, which came out a little bit in Anna's presentation, but which comes through, I think, quite strongly in the report. And that is really the people-centered nature of transition and the importance of people in that transition. And Yanwa has a fantastic phrase in which she refers to as Afro-capitalism, and works a lot with entrepreneurs, particularly young entrepreneurs in Africa, to be able to focus on innovative solutions to climate challenges and also the circular economy. And I think one of the really fantastic parts of the foundation that she works with is really supporting entrepreneurship and people-centered innovation and putting that at the heart of circular economies. And I think it really reminds us that sometimes when we talk about circular economies and we talk about sectors and so on, we can get a little bit lost in the technical and investment side of things in terms of change. But fundamentally, the transition that we need to make is also about social dimensions and cultural dimensions. And these make the solutions quite unique and specific to the context in which we want to change. So while the report does a fantastic job in providing a bigger picture, I think when we get down to local contexts, often the solutions and the relationships and the drivers are fairly unique to that environment. And that's what makes, I think, some of the discussion that we'll have today very interesting, because we'll start to bring out those unique aspects and lessons, what can be learned and transferred in terms of knowledge, but also what is driven from communities themselves. So I'm going to start off with that bigger picture with Mathieu Bosquet, who's joined us. And I think if I can start off on that, Europe is really considered a leader in circular economy. There's a lot of great ambition on circular economy towards sustainable development across Europe, and a lot of lessons which can be learned. But you will know that transferring those lessons and transferring those policies and strategies and investments which are driving transition in Europe can be quite challenging, particularly if we shift those lessons to emerging economies. So I just wanted to learn from you about, what are the, if you like, the key highlights from where Europe is going in circular economy, and what do you think can be transferred? What are the lessons which could be drawn from emerging economies and developing countries?
Thank you, Donovan, and thank you to Urbanisation for this presentation and this good report. I work in a DG which is in charge of neighborhood, so I'm not in charge of climate change or circular economy. But indeed, this is very relevant because we are talking about how can we transfer the good experience and the lead we had on circular economy and globally on managing transitions in the neighboring countries in Europe and just outside Europe. So what I think, the important thing is not to look at the technicalities, and this is, I think, the first point. I mean, you need to think big, you need to think about the spatial planning, you need to think big first. And when we think big, I mean, we need to revisit, I mean, the way the cities need to be prepared. So, I mean, just some elements. I'm not going to talk about the figures because, I mean, they're there, but clearly the cities are going to get much more importance in the future, increase of the population, but increase of production, of GDP. Also, the displaced people are going to go mainly in the cities, displaced because of security issues or because of climate change. So the importance of the city, I mean, is highlighted today. And we have also this triple crisis: biodiversity, pollution, and climate. So we need to address all of that. So what do we need for cities? We need cities that are resilient, so that are working clearly on adaptation strategies. We need cities that are low carbon, so we have mitigation strategies. We need cities that are providing welfare, meaning social and economic strategies. And we need also cities that do respond to a certain form of expectations in terms of governance. And I like to insist on that. Of course, I'm coming from the public sector, so I want to insist on that. So this also requires, I mean, for the cities to react real time. This is important, to be resilient, to have a systemic approach, and also to have some learning and retrofitting system. And this is, I mean, also one of your points. I think it was point 9 or point 10 in your presentation. So we need to have really, and this is maybe the lessons learned from what happens in Europe. I mean, you need champions of people who want to think about the transformation of the city. So you need transformation of institutions, democratic institutions, welfare, as I mentioned, financial, and all of that requires innovation. I was glad, I mean, to hear our colleague talking about the innovation in also getting the private sector involved. And we need physical transformation, that's evident, but thinking differently. And this is really a paradigm shift. So we need to think about nature-based solutions, green infrastructure. We need also a new relationship with the ecosystems, the neighboring ecosystems. The city is not isolated. I mean, it interacts with the neighboring ecosystems. I mean, of course, for food supply and for energy and for water, but more than that. And now we can see the ecosystem also as a value that we need to factor in. Transport, decarbonization of energy grid, shorter supply food system, human development, and maybe a new dimension that we have seen also with COVID and with the Russian war of aggression against Ukraine is a dimension of security. Security of supply, but also security of people. And what you said is also important. It has to be context specific. So there is no recipe, and that has to be very clear. We have to go through adaptation and finding the right system. So what can we do, Europe, to support that, in particular now going to circular economy? I think we first need to help the cities to think strategically. So this is about learning, this is about the vision, this is about setting a strategy. We need a multi-form of governance, getting civil society, private sector, informal sector that you highlight in the report, but also the ecosystems to be factored in. I mean, we need to speak for the ecosystems when they are not there at the table. So, so this is an important part that we need to orchestrate, that the cities need to orchestrate. We need to foster technical and social innovation. There is a lot of technical and social innovation taking place, and you are giving a lot of examples. But we need that to factor in, meaning that we need to also listen. We, the cities, need to listen to the solutions coming from the ground, also the unknown solution. So to be open and receptive. Just some examples. I mean, in our region, I mean, SwitchMed, for example, I mean, is a good example in the Mediterranean region. I mean, to move and to get some examples of innovation on circular economy, for example, but also access to finance. I mean, in the Western Balkans, we have the EDIC, which is really stimulating by new financial mechanisms, investing in equity, SMEs, to become a key player in the circular economy, referring to the first presentation. And I think one of the key elements is that everybody, I mean, should win something. So we need to have a win-win-win-win-win-win. I mean, I don't know how many players we are, but we need to have along the value chain a gain for every actor. And overall, this will result in a gain for the city and for the society. We can play as a EU or as a city. I mean, we are absent, surprisingly, on the last slide, but okay, fine. That's fine, that's fine. That's just a joke. So we can invest in supporting institutions. The public procurement is also a way to set a framework. We have also a partnership. I mean, we're just signing today our partenariat vert with the Kingdom of Morocco for a green partnership. I mean, to frame our cooperation along, I mean, the green transition. And we need to think about how we are scaling up all these initiatives, because all these initiatives are very good, but they are going to become, I mean, to be still a drop in the ocean if we want to meet the challenge. So how do we organize ourselves, the cities, with these governance issues, with the change of paradigm to upscale and achieve our objectives?
Thanks, Matthew. I mean, that's very comprehensive and I think very well balanced as well. I think you've managed to cover all of the bases very nicely. I think that one thing that really comes through for me was the context-specific nature of tools and entry points. I think broadening the governance of cities is also very important, obviously, in terms of what we've reflected upon, and also creating and fostering learning cities, learning environments, cities which can essentially put in place ways in which they can learn from the challenges that they face and build upon those learnings for scale systemic change. So I think it's very nice. But could you highlight what you think maybe a few of the key obstacles are in terms of making that transition? Because it's a big list. It's the ideal city, which you've laid out in some respects. What do you think are some of the obstacles which maybe are more important for us?
I mean, first we need to get champions. I mean, leading. And what we have seen in the EU is a transition has succeeded. I mean, when there was, I mean, at the top of a city, I mean, democratically elected, I mean, leaders that really want to bring change and to accept also to be challenged by the experience coming. So I think openness and comprehensiveness, I mean, are key if we want to succeed. The second point, I think, is getting everybody in. We need to have an inclusive approach. This is also important in terms of communication. I mean, it's extremely important that we communicate about where we are going. What do we want to change? We need behavior change. And this behavior change, I mean, is not something you just act like that and is taking place. You need really people to understand, I mean, the movement, the trajectory, but also the need to go quick. And this is what matters.
Thank you. Great. I'm going to come to you now. Again, from a European perspective, but from a different one. BMZ is a respected donor, but I think one of the things that people really relate to the work of BMZ and also GIZ is around thought leadership. And clearly over the last several years, you've moved more firmly into circular economy work in terms of research, but also investing and supporting transitions towards circular economies in emerging countries and developing countries as well. Just want to know why, what has driven that? I mean, what is the importance of circular economy to your overall urban portfolio? Why has it become important, and what do you hope to see it catalyzing in terms of cities and urban change?
Yeah, thanks for the question. Let me start with giving you a quick overview of our strategic approach to a sustainable urban development and how circularity is situated within this approach. As some of you may know, that we have recently, about a year ago, launched our new core area strategy on climate, energy, and just transition. And sustainable urban development is one of 3 areas of intervention within the strategic framework. And BMZ's approach to supporting sustainable urban development in our partner countries is to focus on an integrated approach. You've highlighted the importance of this integrated approach in your presentation. And within this integrated approach, take specific, you so nicely called them urban systems, and dive deeper on them. And the four urban systems that we focus on are mobility, building and housing, circular economy, and water and everything that is related to water. And obviously, as you already pointed out, those urban systems are not standalone systems, but they interact, they form a big urban system in themselves. And with our new government taking office the end of last year, new priorities were basically added on top of this existing strategy. And the most relevant aspects of those new priorities for our work on urban transition is a stronger focus on just transition and what our minister calls a feminist development policy. So let me get into a little more detail regarding circularity in cities. How did we get there and why is it so important from our perspective? I think same as many actors in this field, we came from a waste treatment approach. And I think it's obvious now that waste treatment isn't enough. When we want to make cities sustainable, want to make cities livable, and want to make them sustainable in all three dimensions, that is ecological, economic, and social, we need to start earlier. We really need to make urban systems circular. We need to start with design, we need to look at infrastructure, and so on and so forth. So that's where we came from. And what we're doing now is trying to implement this idea of circularity in all of those sectors, be it construction, where we look at innovative construction designs and methods, utilizing renewable local materials, thereby in an ideal setting, creating local value chains. And there comes the social dimension, right? Creating local value chains, create good jobs for the people living in those cities. Same for mobility, where we look at sustainable mobility solutions. And again, with our just transition focus, very much look at what are the employment opportunities, what are the impacts of changing a non-sustainable system to a sustainable system for the people, and most importantly, what are the solutions that people in those systems already have, right? And I think this focus that we have with your study on informal settlements is a very much promising here, because for once, the perspective of slum dwellers is often overlooked. So putting it into focus really creates the opportunity to use those experiences, use those ideas more and utilize them to achieve the goals we want to achieve. And when we look at informal settlements, right, in many cases, they're living more sustainable than we as a society as a whole. I mean, in most parts, it's involuntarily because they don't have the access to the linear consumerist way of life that we're fencing ourselves with. But still, I mean, we shouldn't really promote for them to move to our way of consuming and doing business, but really, I think you mentioned it, the leapfrogging from where they are now to a equally sustainable, at least equally sustainable system, but which provides a higher quality of life and a better livelihood for them. I think I'm going to stop there. I can give a few examples of our work if you want.
I'd love to hear some examples, yeah.
All right, and let me that. What we did in 2019 was we launched the so-called Prevent Waste Alliance, which is a network basically of more than 300 organizations from all different sectors that you mentioned that is important for the private sector, obviously from academia, civil society, public institutions. And the goal is to create this impetus of changing the system. I think you said we need to have leaders. We need to have someone who moves first and promotes this kind of different way of doing business in a way. And with the Waste Alliance, we, for example, have this kind of innovation challenges where the members can come up with innovative solutions to promote circular economy, and then get a certain kind of financial but also intellectual support to put it into practice. We very much have a strong focus on the built environment. For example, we have a project with UNEP where we're in Bangladesh, India, Ghana, and Senegal promoting a circular economy approach in the construction industry. The framework is to be developed for responsible production of building materials, and also in a way a materials market, really support the creation of a materials market for sustainable and thereby materials with a circularity potential, so to say, right?
It's great. Thank you. Great. I was going to ask for some specific examples, so you led straight into it, which is fantastic. It's a great opportunity now to pass over to Sonia, because I think in the last couple of comments we've heard a lot more about informality and the informal sector. And I think, as Ruben has rightly pointed out, some of that aspect of circularity and sustainability is enforced upon the poor, but also there's a lot that can be learned from the systems which have been developed in place, particularly with respects to livelihood, support, empowerment, including for women, in the circular economy. And there's a lot that can be built upon and learn from that. So, Sonia, the report does do a really great job and reflects, I think, both our, but particularly Cities Alliance commitment to pro-poor solutions and its commitment to informality as well. And we know that informality is a critical sector in the circular economy in emerging markets and the developing world. We know that it's often unrecognized or overlooked, and a lot of calls to eliminate informality or to try and formalize informality as a part of the solution. But we know that that's very difficult in practice and not always the best outcome. So I just want to ask you to really reflect, particularly from a gender and pro-informal sector, if you like, approach and perspective and experience of how we can better support informality in the informal sector in circular economies for cities.
Thank you so much. I think the introductory remarks and the snapshot on the publication launched today have made the case that there is an increasing call for a new economic system to address our current trajectory. And the circular economy, has been seen as a way towards a new economic model to address the many challenges that we face today. But this transition to the circular economy, and this has been established in the literature, and it really brings on a number of technical, financial, and institutional challenges, but there is also a political and ethical challenge that we really need to place front and center, and the publication really address that, which is how can the livelihoods of the informal waste pickers, which accounts for, the estimates, the ILO estimates. It's around 20 million workers playing a crucial role in recycling chains. How can they be, appropriately integrated into this new system? I think there is much to be done on theoretical framing or circular economy, which for me has been so far really focused on material aspects and not really being building inclusivity organically in its conceptualization. But the experiences that we have on the ground from cities that are really engaging in terms of building their solid waste systems from what already exists, really kind of bring us some light in terms of how can we address circularity in ways that it's inclusive. We don't need to say again how vital waste pickers are in cities around the world. In some contexts, they are the ones providing only waste collection that there is in the city, and they play a crucial role in the recycling chain. So, as I said, in a handful of cities, we have some promising examples. I can talk about examples that come from Colombia, Bogota, Colombia, and many other cities in Colombia. We have examples coming from Buenos Aires in Argentina, in which the city engages with the existing cooperatives to provide segregated at source collection. We have examples in India. Pune is one such example, and we have examples from my own city that since Belo Horizonte in Brazil, that since 1993 has contracted waste picker co-ops to perform the recycling, the municipal recycling collection. One of the examples, cases depicted in the publication, pardon me, launched today, comes from my city, is the Zero Waste project, which is a partnership between the waste picker co-op with a group of environmental activists. And in this project, we articulate waste pickers with the local community of a given neighborhood in my city. We have a food co-op system. We have a drop-off site for recyclables and vegetable gardens. And we engage with the residents in this neighborhood in environmental awareness. All of these examples are attempting to really bring into practice a circular model that is inclusive. And while city integration is really one of the key elements in the transition towards the circular economy with social inclusion, I think it's also important to raise awareness on the relevance, on the importance of national solid waste policies. In my country, we have been an example in terms of a national solid waste framework which addresses inclusivity. We have Colombia also as a good example in terms of national policies. And I think it's important for us to understand that for cities to adopt models that are inclusive, that goes towards an inclusive circular economy, there are a few challenges that needs to be addressed. One is the majority of workers in the informal recycling sector throughout the whole world are still not organized. So we need to strengthen efforts to support organizing processes. Donor agencies and NGOs also have an important role there in encouraging organizing of waste speakers, specifically in contexts where they do not exist or the organizations are very weak. So workers organizing is important. The second thing I want to mention is the importance of getting governments and businesses prepared. The process of integrating waste speakers requires an understanding of the many complexities of waste speaking and a willingness to think outside the box in order to see waste management, because the more traditional and conventional approaches goes to capital intensive technologies rather than building from what already exists in the cities of the global south. And the third challenge I want to raise is around the challenges that waste speakers themselves need to really address. There is a need for their organizations, the cooperatives and other organizations that it's out there to invest on professionalization of the services that they provide in cities. So in this sense, there might be a need for them to professionally seek experts who have recognized technical expertise in order to support them in capacity building so that they can provide the quality service that cities require when hiring organizations to perform recycling services of solid waste collection services. So in conclusion, if these challenges can be addressed, I think there is a potential for waste speakers to play an important part in the global circular system, a circular system that really integrates all the key dimensions, the environmental, the economic, and the social dimensions, and that could change not only the health and state of our planet, but also the lives of some of the world's poorest workers. So circular economy without livelihoods protection is just business as usual. And I'm really happy that this publication launched today. It's really integrated these aspects, but I raised the call that we need to be aware of waste to energy technologies and capital intensive technologies being just transplanted to the cities of the global south. So I raised this concern here. Thanks.
Thank you, Sonia. That was an excellent summary. And you took up an additional question off my plate in terms of where you see some of the dangers, and clearly some of the dangers is in a technology focused set of solutions to problems which are fundamentally create outcomes which don't benefit the poorest. I think it also raised, you returned to really some points that Matthew was raising as well about broadening governance and broadening the voices in solutions that we put forward and their contextual nature. And I think the example of Colombia, but also across Latin America, the way that waste pickers have become organized, but also recognized through public policy, through support of cooperatives in legal frameworks to be able to support waste pickers to have a voice and to play a role in national waste strategies. This was something which is, I think, is a leading example for us all in terms of the way that we integrate informality into international and solutions. Thank you.
Yes, I just want quickly to raise the issue of social dialogue as a key component in our transition into circular economies, but social dialogue that is done in ways that is continued. It's not one and off policy engagement. So the need for participatory platforms that are regular is really important for us to incorporate the voices of the working poor.
Thank you, Sonia. Point very well made and very much appreciated. Cedric, we're now going to come back to you. Having said all of that, and we have right at the beginning of this morning, you know, we were reminded of the statistic on, say, for example, African built environment, 60, 70, 80% yet to be built, so on. But we know in Europe, you know, 80, 70% of buildings that we have are going to be the infrastructure of the future and so on. But in emerging economies, you know, there is an enormous potential negative materials footprint and carbon footprint if we don't get the infrastructure right, if we don't get particularly resilient, adaptive and low carbon infrastructure, particularly focused on embodied carbon as well. And I know that Wholesome has been working on a lot of innovative solutions. So we have obviously a focus on non-traditional materials, but also the traditional materials that we have, we still have to work with, and we have to make them work for us better.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm wondering if you could just introduce us to some of the innovations, say, for example, from Wholesome, and where you see these innovations going and contributing to taking embodied carbon out of systems in emerging economies, but also supporting the circular economy transition as well.
Sure. We have 3.5 hours more. No, look, I'll be quick. There's three things I would like to share. First of all, the first one is one of our objectives is to try to develop and push to market solutions at scale. And at scale doesn't mean we're going to use the same solution everywhere. What you said is that it all depends on the local context. It's super important. Now we'll come back to that in link with the regulatory framework, but it's addressing these global trends and the figures that you mentioned, which are staggering. So we need solutions at scale today. We need to provoke this change of paradigm in the full construction value chain, which is hyper fragmented, which is the two-person company building to larger companies, and find a way to provoke this radical collaboration between the different actors. Us as a big company, but local, being a local provider of construction solutions for big and small actors alike. So what we do is we focus on, let's say, 4 pillars of action. And all are based on the principle that it starts today. And the solutions we have now will be different in 2030 and 40 and 50 and so on. But we start today. The first thing we do is to put on the market, we call them green building solutions. But that includes, for example, a range of concrete, which is also available in Africa, which is called EcoPact, which is a concrete which has a reduced carbon footprint that varies according to the project, the need, between 30 and 90%. It's doable today. It's available today. An example, it's used in the development of iconic tower in Egypt, which is going to be Africa's tallest building. And that means that this building will have an embedded carbon footprint reduced by 50%. It's a good step that we can do today. Now, the iconic tower is probably not a good example because it's a cash-rich project, but this is available in bagged cement for construction everywhere. So the question is, and I'll come back at the end on how you create that demand, how do you get that in the mind of people that you can purchase these lower carbon products that are available today? The second element, the second pillar is making circular materials a reality. So for us, it means building new from old. The question for us is how do we get a hand on construction demolition waste to make sure we reintroduce it? It's not a question of technology, really. It's a question of standards. The role of the regulator there is fundamental. In the world, the first country that allows us to put 20% construction demolition waste into our cement was Switzerland. Without the standard, we can't put it on the market. And I can't put it on the market in Germany across the border today. We're working with your colleagues. It's going to happen soon. But that is globally relevant. Anywhere in the world, if you want to put an innovative product on the market,
Doesn't mean necessarily more expensive, but you need the standard because construction is regulated everywhere. The third pillar is how we work more with project developers so that they put different actors together from the beginning. I'll give you an example. We've done a project where we work with Zaha Hadid Architects, computational designers. And you can build a bridge today which use 70% less material just by using or working from the beginning with computational engineers who will design a bridge, taking kind of material that we will provide, so that instead of having a bridge like this, you can have a bridge like this with the same use range, structural resistance, everything. And we've used that in Africa to print schools in Malawi. So you arrive with your whole kit, you print the school in 18 hours. So a day later, you're gone. And it's there. And amazingly, you start finding that you mobilize the whole community because there is a Star Trek experience where you build it. Everyone wants to go to school. You solve an infrastructural issue, which is the building, and you provide an educational response, and you do that, and you save 70% of materials. And that's just by putting a material provider together with a robotics company, together with a computational engineer, and you have amazing results. And it's being used also for social housing projects in Kenya. So these kind of technology are available everywhere, and it's not just here or the Western world it happened. It's available today everywhere. The last pillar is what we call the next generation technologies. This is more about what we're doing, but enable us to put on the market. So at the end, we will want to have net zero cement, net zero concrete, which require us to invest in carbon capture, for example. If we want to have 100%, we're super proud that at our innovation center, they managed to produce the first batch of 100% recycled clinker, which is the basis for cement and concrete. We need to scale that up. That's generation technologies. So that gives you a little flavor of the different areas where we go. But I think underlying in your question is how do we make that happen, and how do we collaborate with what do we need to make that happen at scale? And here I think there is one element which is the most important, is how do we create demand at scale for this innovation? There is a universal answer, it's building codes. Building codes that exist everywhere, that need to integrate and evolve as fast as the innovation evolves. It's not easy, but it's absolutely necessary. And that translates also in public procurement all around the world. And that's where I disagree a little bit with one of your conclusions. In our perspective, it's not about materials. It's not about whether it's bio-based or concrete or glass or whatever. It's about defining the performance. If you want to build a school in Malawi, or if you want to build a high-rise here in Brussels, it's all about defining the performance that you need to achieve. What is that building? What makes that building 1.5 degree aligned? While responding to the local economic prerogatives, it's about defining the performance. And if you build a house in northern Finland, of course it's going to be in wood. If you build a high-rise in Brussels, not necessarily. And it depends on what you were saying, your local context, your local circumstances, your local value chain. But the market and companies, big or small, will react really fast. If the market says, okay, this is what we need to do, this is what the construction market needs, innovation will churn out, and you will have a very fast reaction of the market. So it's about performance, integrating public procurement and building codes. It's a little bit of a Western, perhaps, view of the world, but it applies, I think it applies everywhere. And you know, what Sonia referred to in the waste sector, I believe the same applies to it. You need a regulatory framework so that the informal sector can cooperate, can be integrated in the full waste vision, and that actors can play together, and you can create leverage on one another. So this regulatory framework standardization is fundamental perspectives.
Is there any particular market, innovative market that you work in now in emerging economies, global south, which really stands out as a leader in terms of building capacity, addressing building codes, thinking about traditional materials differently and providing a more favorable regulatory environment? I know you mentioned Switzerland, obviously it's a world leader in terms of this, but are there other places as well that we should be aware of, that we should know more about?
Well, look, I think it's evolving fast. I wouldn't like to pick up one country or one city, and each and every city has different challenges. But I think the example I used of using 3D printing technology to develop school network in Malawi or a social housing complexes in Kenya shows that you can do it anywhere. If you can do it there, you can do it anywhere. And it's just the vision of the local decision maker, the local city saying, I want to bring these actors together. I want to have a vision in my public procurement that allows for this to happen. And putting, it's this radical collaboration, which I think is new, and in those markets where we see, like we as a company, as a material provider, we're changing from being a commodity provider to being a construction partner, because we need to be embedded in the not in the public procurement, but in the discussion around what needs to be built with the different actors, and you start from the beginning as a partnership.
Right. Thank you. Terrific. 3.5 hours for a lifetime into 7.5 minutes. A pretty good effort. Anna, you provided a fantastic summary of the report. Everyone's very positive about the report, and yet we know that circularity, and say, for example, if we use the example of waste circularity, is a stubbornly low global figure. We talk about it as if it's now the dominant paradigm, but we know that we're talking below 20% in many cases. Circular economy and waste management is stubbornly globally at sort of 12, 13, 14%. So it's still a minority of where we need to get to. So I'm just wondering, in terms of your reflections of what you've heard so far, is there any things that really stand out from what the panelists have been discussing today, which you think, yeah, that's actually a really great future direction in terms of turning that statistic around?
Yeah, I think on reflection of the conversation, I can see that we're often coming to the problem with solutions based on a mindset that has existed in a trajectory of a consumptive behavior. It's very difficult, I think, to come out of that. And I think we probably all need to take a step back and actually look to those who are on the ground, work quite often, as we have heard, have those solutions already. They have, I think we heard earlier, there are solutions that are being implemented. These people need to be listened to, and we need to accept that our society and our systemic approach to consuming, extracting and creating pollution needs to be completely shifted, and it's difficult for us, I think, to come away from that. So I would say firstly we should maybe look to them for more of these solutions. I think another point is that every city is different. Again, I'm reiterating some points, but I think it's about working with each of those cities, looking at material flow mapping, look at the jobs that exist there now and the skills that exist, and ensuring that there's a transition that is just for all those people. If it's waste pickers, renewable technology, how are we shifting away from burning wood as fuel to renewables, and how do you bring those people along? I think the digital issue is a big one. I think the statistic in 2017, 23% of African people have internet access. In order to enable greater opportunities around waste, we need to onboard people, and that's where that investment is needed. So I would say, yeah, mindset shift, from businesses to local governments, and also, it's not just about some of these rapidly urbanizing secondary cities. We are equally, we are worse. We need to sort our own systems out rather than coming through approaches. So I think the opportunity is great. I think maybe the challenge is time. We need to act very quickly. Climate change, as we've heard, we're 1 degree warmer than the pre-industrial revolution. I think a 2.5 degree increase, we'll know that I think 2 billion people will experience severe heat waves every 20 years, and we'll triple the amount of flooding we'll experience, and we're on track to a 3 degree world. So I think we need to act now with urgency. But yeah, it's a new mindset shift that we need to take on board, which is a difficult one, I think.
You wanted to answer?
Yeah, in my perspective, the biggest game changer would simply be legislation. Yeah, I'll give you a very concrete example. But the context, we can substitute fossil fuel that we use in our installation by ultimate residual waste. So it's non-recyclable waste. So that's the fraction of waste that has to be destroyed, which is growing. That includes a portion of municipal waste. So when we have operations in Nigeria, so we can do that to a very large extent. Our colleagues in Austria arrive at 100% of that, so zero fossil fuel. Our operations in Nigeria see around them, frightening amounts of municipal waste being dumped, and we use 0%, zero, simply because there is no regulatory framework. There is no organized system that says this is the role of the informal sector, this is the role of the formal sector, this is the role of technologies and investment in some technologies, and it's not all capital intensive. If you can have a basic mechanical sorting piece of equipment that costs $150,000 in a dump, and you already do basic things very efficiently. But the regulatory framework, the existence of a regulatory framework and a vision that identifies the different parts of the local ecosystem and give direction would be a huge game changer.
I think, Sonia, even in terms of informality and informal waste pickers, which is a very complex and difficult set of communities to work with, has demonstrated how even a regulatory framework, if the will is there, and if also the mobilization and organization of waste pickers is there, can actually evolve into very strong regulatory governance frameworks, which are empowering. I'm going to come to the audience now. We've got a lot of people in the room, so this is a chance to ask better questions from you guys, so help me out. And we've also got some people online as well. So I'm very happy if people just want to direct specific questions to specific panelists, or whether it's a broader question that you'd like some responses to, but let's take at least some time to come to the audience and to hear some different perspectives and ideas. And don't forget Sonia online there as well, and gave a fantastic presentation. So I'm happy to throw the floor open, and I'll wait for also those that are connected online if there are questions that are coming up through the chat as well. So please just raise your hand, and thank you.
Yes. Hi, thank you. My name is Piotr from the EEB, European Environmental Bureau. I have a few questions. I will be short, but they are in a sequence. So if I may ask a few of them. Okay. So one is to Sonia from WIEGO. You mentioned about waste pickers, and I wanted to ask about this very specific tool that was not mentioned, but the EPR, excellent producer responsibility. How, and we know that in emerging economies, EPR will be introduced many. In Europe, we have it not working perfectly, but anyway, how to make EPR working for informal waste pickers too. Second question is about one point in the presentation that was saying that it was in the construction section that waste to energy is supported. I don't understand why. What do you mean? Do you mean burning waste or do you mean anaerobic digestion? So coming from organic waste, biogas, which we agree. There is no place for waste to energy, burning waste in Africa, whatever. For many reasons, I will not explain it now here. But if it makes sense for the anaerobic digestion, maybe it should be in the agriculture section or in the solid waste section. Then also a bit more broader about cities and cities alliance. So of course, a lot of competences cities have, but also a lot of them don't have. For example, what is put on the market in those countries or in any country. And so how cities alliances, there are different cities alliances, and all the stakeholders, apart from all the stakeholders that are impacted by wrong design of products, which is a priority. Yeah? Good design is a priority for circular economy. That was not much mentioned here, except construction, very well addressed here on the design of construction, but design of products is beyond the competences of cities. So how cities can also work together to advocate at national state. And that brings me to the EU, even higher than only national state. So how EU can help through trade those countries by importing products from those countries, maybe not, well, some of China or India, yes, they produce for us, maybe less Africa, but how some due diligence rules can help in better expansion or spreading of circular economy principle, because due diligence can be maybe a tool to incentivize that. Whatever is not circular has no place in the European market. So, you know, we create maybe some clear incentives, but also reverse due diligence. Whatever we send out from Europe, and it still happens, we send waste out to developing countries. Even Basel Convention is there, but it's very often circumvented. Yeah.
Okay, can we stop
Okay.
at 4?
Okay.
It's okay. I don't want to cut you off.
Yeah.
But I know that the microphone doesn't pick up. So very briefly, a question on extended producer responsibility. Sonia, but others maybe can raise that as well, because I also think that links into trade policy and the regulatory environment about trade and particularly exporting issues. Also a very good question on waste to energy and how that can be more effectively addressed. And one for, I guess, Cities Alliance, but the whole issue about supporting transition through appropriate technology and design and helping in that area as well. So I'll throw it open to the panel.
I mean, the EPR extended producer responsibility, I think we're starting to see that integrated into some policies and through the NDCs. From what I see in some cities and countries are bringing that into place, particularly maybe around plastics. Yes, I mean, that's all I have to say. You probably know, but I guess more needs to be done. And equally in Europe, we're quite slow to act. Maybe if I go to the point about anaerobic digestion, waste to energy point, yes, I get your point. I think we talked about biogas, okay. But yeah, some of these issues sit across some of the different urban systems, but maybe we can pick that up in the break afterwards and have discussions about that. I'll also pick up the point around products, which I think you're right that you said around construction processes, but actually it's the products. And what we're finding, again, with the new systems approach is that manufacturers would no longer, in a circular economy, extract, process and leave it in the system, but actually they would be agents of change in that they would be responsible for those materials and actually take those back. And so the business model would be slightly different, that they would have those back within their organization, and they would trade online to send those, recycle those back out, as in reuse them and keep them at their highest residual value. So yeah, maybe that could have been addressed a bit more, but I definitely think products, whether it's construction material or services, again, circular economy is about, rather than buying a product, it's leasing it, it's coming up with new ways of achieving that.
Great answer. Sonia, did you?
Yeah, Okay, very briefly. Yeah, thanks for raising EPR. This is it's a key issue. I think we need to reflect a lot about EPR and its room for inclusivity by taking into consideration that we need to revisit the voluntary schemes. You know, it's not really playing a good role in terms of inclusivity. So this is one point. Another point is around transparency of the systems that are EPR systems being implemented around the world. The third point I raise is the importance of having participatory governance mechanisms of EPR systems in which workers are represented. I think we need to design the systems, and in the case of Brazil, we have a reverse logistics system which includes cooperatives, organized waste pickers, but does not allow for inclusivity of the non-organized who also live, you know, experiments, working conditions that are very poor. So in a quick answer, yes, participatory governance mechanisms with representation of workers. Go to mandatory, not voluntary, because it doesn't play a good role in inclusivity, and transparency schemes in which we really know what are the rules of the game, how is inclusivity really being factored in these EPR systems.
Thank you. Do we want to tackle trade and broader responsibilities as well for products?
The question was partly to the union. Well, I think, I mean, the EU, I mean, we're trying to be very gentle in terms of thinking more sustainable. Globally, I mean, now we are moving forward with the carbon border adjustment mechanism. I mean, we need to see also, I mean, the impact it has in partner countries. So, and this is something that, I mean, where, I mean, you are talking about due diligence. So it's due diligence about what comes in, it's due diligence about what gets out, but it's also how are we helping the partner countries to adapt to these new realities. And therefore, all the support programs that we're having in DGNU, particularly to help the partner countries to prepare for going for more low carbon strategies. So this is exactly, I mean, what is at the core of a big number of programs. I was mentioning SwitchMed as an example, but we have in many places around the world. I mean, to create this local ownership. But I want also to mention that with the new element, I mean, we need to think also shorter supply. So, I mean, overall, I mean, this puts into question also, I mean, these ideas of this global trade, which is going to be the perfect solution for everything. As I said, I mean, with COVID and with the war of Russia in Ukraine, I mean, then we can see the impact. So we need also, again, I mean, it's an additional element to think locally and to think shorter routes.
Maybe I can come in on the question, what cities can do and what lever do they have. I think there are many answers to that question. One was already touched upon by you when you said circles will be more local and more confined to a small area, which is necessary to make them sustainable, right? You will have a hard time making global circles sustainable due to the transportation issue. So the more local a value chain and the value circle, if you want to call it that way, becomes, the bigger the influence of the local administration. That's one. But that's, I would say, is a bit of future stuff. Right now, there's already stuff that cities can do, right? They can use regulations. They can use their own procurement. They can use frameworks, codes, and whatever to influence it. But then also they can create positively incentives. They can start innovation programs. They can provide enabling infrastructure to set up local circular value chains and so on and so forth. So that's the second thing they can do. And the third thing, obviously, is to unify networks both on a national and on an international level, and that it's already happening, and thereby influence both national legislation and also international processes.
And Cedric.
Yeah, I would support what you just said, because I think the biggest tools, as much as we support CBAM, it's extremely complex. It involves a great deal of multilateral negotiations, and it's complex to put in place. But cities have at their disposal, they have the standards route and the procurement routes, and both go together. This is probably the most effective way to, let's say, to influence a market behavior.
Just go online
Yeah,
for the chat. I don't know if you want to, Enrico, if you want to raise any questions that have come from those online.
There is a question for Cedric. In developing countries, who are the key stakeholders and what are the incentives for them to act on changing building codes, regulatory frameworks, and public procurement?
Can you read it again?
In developing countries, who are the key stakeholders and what are the incentives for them to act on changing building codes, regulatory frameworks, and public procurement? I also have a question actually myself.
Yeah. So who are the key targets in terms of shifting those, like those local regulatory environment?
Yeah, well, it's the local decision makers, it's the local city makers in cooperation. Again, it's the idea of radical collaboration, where you need to have the real estate developers at the table with the local city decision makers, and bring about this paradigm change in the value chain. Because in construction, the particularity of this value chain is that it's hyper fragmented. It involves any project involves hundreds of little decision-making processes, which accumulate one after the other. So radical collaboration, and cities will always remain the main actors that impact the evolution of building codes and regulation.
I mean, we've been working with some of the neighboring countries on changing the building codes and the energy efficiency standards. I mean, just adding to what Cedric was saying, I mean, this is important. This is part of the framework. It's a message you're sending to the market and to the private sector as well, saying, I mean, look, we want, I mean, with our public procurement, with the standards and the building codes, energy efficiency standards, whatever. I mean, we're sending a message, we as a public authority are sending a message to the private sector. This is a trajectory. This is where you need to go. And of course, I mean, the more innovative companies are not going to be protected if it is not basically, if the standards are still very big and general. I mean, then the added value of one company or several companies that want to make change, I mean, they will cost maybe a little bit more money, but at least, I mean, we have an ambition in terms of energy or whatever. So we need that, and there is resistance to change. I mean, let's face it. I mean, changing a law. I mean, I know one country, which I'm not going to name it. I mean, it took us 3 years in a dialogue with the members of parliament, with the builders, with the companies, and so on. I mean, to change the law. So it takes time, but this is a clear message.
Yeah, it's just reiterating a few times now the comment that public policy has a key role to play, and governments and municipalities have a key role to play as well, in terms of shaping and driving, but also creating that framework which will crowd out the kinds of actors and the kinds of practices that you want to crowd out, and also crowd in those that you give greater opportunities through innovation for.
I was just going to add to that. I suppose it is that transition, and by creating roadmaps that show those actors where the future is going, that they have time to adapt and evolve in terms of whatever place they play in this process, that those roadmaps give some direction.
I mean, just to add on that, I mean, we recently signed a contract with OECD to help the countries of the Western Balkans to implement circular economy roadmaps. Exactly to send a signal. I mean, there's public policy, so it's an 8 million euros contract, so it's big, but it's really to help the public policy makers. I mean, to think and to send a signal to the market. And I want also, I mean, to mention the question of partnership. I mean, you mentioned very quickly, but I think it's key. What we are going, I mean, if we are going to get changes, is that we are going to get changes along the value chains if we are successful in building partnerships. I mean, with private sector, with civil society, with the workers, the poor workers, the informal sector, and with the citizens. And therefore, I'm coming back to still my motto of changing, I mean, having this paradigm shift. I mean, you're calling it a mindset shift, but it's the same. I mean, it's addressing all together, getting everybody on board, not agreeing on techniques, but setting a trajectory. And then we will pick up. We will see what comes from existing systems, what comes from private sector. We support it in terms of innovation. So we also need to think about financing this innovation. And then the results, I mean, can be scaled up and replicated. Of course, always adapted to the local context, but this is important. This is what we are doing with Mayors for Economic Growth, a partnership with UNDP. I mean, in the Eastern Partnership, is really to think completely overall with some cities, how to change the approach and adopt this multi-layer governance.
If I may add another aspect, and this is also something we're working on, and that's capacity of municipal governments and municipal administrations. Often, especially if you look at those fast-growing secondary cities, those administrations, they lack the capacity to be on the forefront of driving this kind of change, right? I mean, they don't have enough personnel. They might sometimes not even be aware of probably the problem, but not aware of available solutions. And this is something where we are trying to support this in our partner countries by strengthening their capacity to actually act on those questions, and thereby provide eventually the framework that enables a proliferation of circular economy approaches.
Okay, any other questions from the audience though? Throw it back to those that are.
I had one, but it
Yeah.
also popped up in the chat the same
Okay.
time.
Yep.
It was about the cost of the 3D printing. Is that something sustainable in a way that can be applied to a larger scale, or how do we get to that?
Right. Those two projects were done in partnership with the CDC, which is the British Development Financial Institution. So it's not a demand that came from the market. So they say it was a framed project. I don't have the details of the economics, but the economics were not prohibitive in any way. What needs to be changing there, or this is the first step, if you want, in having a different way of thinking with the municipalities, enabling this kind of technologies through the public procurement. So what you said, capacity building, is fundamental, because it's not the first reference stuff in those cities. Oh, let's do some 3D printing schools. No. So it goes hand in hand. The economic model works because you may think it's going to be much more expensive because you have the robotics, because you have the logistics, but in fact, you're in and out in 18 hours. So it is very cost effective. You use 70% less materials, and yes, the kilo of the material is more expensive, but you use a lot less of it, so your mass of materials is a lot less expensive. So the total cost of ownership is very attractive for these projects. But I would be happy to put anyone in contact with our engineers who have more details about the actual detailed economics of it.
One of the things, finance, we probably haven't had enough time to go into today. It'd be worth another session in itself in terms of financing circular economies and where that finance comes from and what are the key sort of global and national drivers in terms of financing and shifting. Procurement's a good example of that, shifting existing finance of financing things that we don't want to finance into those areas that we do want to finance is also a critical thing. Sometimes it's not just more money or more finance, it's simply shifting the kinds of levers and the kinds of drivers that it needs to do to change. But I think did we have one question from the audience in the room? Yeah, please.
Hi, sorry, it's more a reflection of the crisis, and also the crisis because we mentioned several times mindset change or behavior change. I think is very important, and I think it's too often overlooked in urban planning, urban design, the way we design and develop interventions in circular economy. Because what I saw, I live in Africa many years, for 20 years, and what I saw that in vulnerable communities, circular economy is kind of the backbone, not because it's a choice, it's a need. So, in the moment they have the choice to, and they have the opportunity to change, they go for the car, they leave the bicycle home, they buy a car, they move to a house with air conditions. It's not like choice to be responsible, to be environmental friendly. While in Europe, it's different. We don't have the need. We start to feel the need, we start to feel the urgency. So there's a choice, a rational choice that we want to go with solutions that are sustainable, but it's not the urgency yet. So how can we bring this behavior change element that is extremely important, because if we don't change that, nothing is going to happen. I mean, because in Africa, they will move from being responsible with what they have to become start to consume everything. And so that's not the right path. With the expected economic growth in these countries, are we expecting that they will continue doing so, be responsible with the environment, or are they shifting to the way we behave that is wrong? And how can we change our behavior? I mean, it's a reflection, because I I've heard a lot here, and we all said great things, and like the ideal city that was outlined at the beginning is like perfect. Why is it not working? How can we change behavior? And what I saw in urban planning design, the behavior change is not considered. We only look at solutions. We try to understand the context, we try to understand the users, but we don't make the extra effort to see how we can change behavior of people by through good design things, by engaging. And what I saw is also that in many cases, because there is no budget for that, because also like in projects, the World Bank, you have to do community engagement. Yes, you have 10K, do that. What can you achieve with that? So, it's a mix of challenges here. So I don't want to finish this great discussion with just a challenge. I think it's very important that to keep in mind that behavior change has to be really mainstream. And I'm sure that the European Commission is doing that, but maybe not hand in hand with the environment fashion. So sometimes what I see is that we work in parallel, but not together, really changing the space and the behavior of people in the space.
I'm going to leave that as a comment, unfortunately, because we've run out of time. But I think that focus on behavioural change is really critical. I want to leave enough time. We have to wrap up the panel session because we have Julian Buskin, who's the principal advisor to Cities Alliance, to provide some summary comments. Maybe he'll address that, so we can certainly pick it up afterwards, refreshments time as well. But before we finish up the panel session and invite Julian up, just a round of applause for a terrific and honest set of responses. I think really holistic in the way that we addressed it, helped by a very good report. I don't know if we should be sort of holding it up and advertising it, but there it is. Julian, could you come up and provide your final sort of reflections?
Yeah. Unfortunately, I'm very unstable on my feet at the moment.
Okay. Come as far as you.
So I'm going to go to the lantern so I can hold on to something.
Okay.
And I'll take it from there.
Okay.
This is not age, this is related to the microphone on? So I can understand here.
You don't need the mic.
Okay,
That's the.
okay. Well, thank you so much for those comments. It's very, very rich, and we all understand that these things are fully integrated and complex. And I think everyone understands that. But there were just a couple of things that I thought needed to be brought up, which weren't brought up enough, although there were scatterings of it. And that is, while we sit here, we all have a very deep understanding that our future depends on doing things differently. We have a very deep understanding that unless we do something serious about climate change, we're going to be living in a world that's almost going to be uninhabitable in reality. But if I go to the same forum in Africa, the biggest challenge is jobs. And we should have called this session, quite frankly, rapid urbanization, job creation, and the circular economy. Because if we cannot demonstrate to the youth of today that the circular economy and adaptation and mitigation is not only about the future of the planet and of society as a whole, but it's also about the future of your community. Because right now, as I speak, countries like Haiti, countries even like my own country, South Africa, and countries around the world, the very social fabric is being destroyed because of the lack of jobs. So I think whenever we talk about, we have to say jobs in whatever context. How do we make sure this creates work? Now that brings me up to another aspect. So very often we put things into silos. And the Cities Alliance has done some tremendous work, again with Arab and a lot of our stakeholders, around the question of the secondary cities and around the question of the interface between the hinterland and the secondary cities as being the locus where future jobs will be found. Now, what is the relevance of that? The relevance is this, that the circular economy concept is premised on the idea that you extract, you produce, you consume, and you dispose. In reality, in most countries in the world, you extract and you export. You then import, you distribute, you consume. The point being is, it's in the production is where the jobs are. And unless we start to say that we need to start changing the way in which the global economy is structured, we're never going to reach the principles of the circular economy. So the point I'm making is that fundamental to our work on the circular economy is the work that we do on the rural-urban linkages in the secondary cities in which we work. Because we believe that is fundamental. We've got to get away from this notion that the hinterland is a global hinterland where goods from the hinterland, i.e. Africa, get extracted. We import things back into Africa in the cheapest possible packaging, which is where all this waste comes from, in point of fact. It's not generated in production, it's generated in importation to a large extent. We have to break through that model, and we have to change the hinterland from being Africa being the extractor and then the dumper into Africa and other developing countries also being the producers. Because once we get the question of where jobs are going to be found, it's going to be found in that nexus, then we can start to say to people, let's engage in climate change, let's engage in the circular economy, because it's in the interests of everyone. The second point I wanted to bring up is nothing besides jobs. It's all on equal terms, I suppose. You can have two ideas at the same time. The second point is that nothing is going to happen unless we have local governments with the capacity, and this point was brought up, have the capacity to play the role they need to play. We spend so much time talking about integrated planning, planning approaches, planning methodologies. Yes, but planning is absolutely nothing if you don't have the capacity to implement those plans. And we have to start taking seriously, how do we build up the capacity of secondary cities? How do we build up the capacity of cities generally so that they can actually respond in a real way to the crises of the future, as well as the crises of the present? And that is the problem right now. In most secondary cities, in most cities in Africa and in the developing world, the local government can't move beyond the immediate crisis. Yet we're talking about strategic planning, which had means to go into the longer term. And the way I like to explain this is that, you take the cities that are really at the forefront of the circular economy, you take cities that are, so for example, you would go to Amsterdam and say, look, Amsterdam got this fantastic notion of the donut, it couldn't be a better concept to try. But if I were to take away 75% of your skilled workers and say you now only got 25% of the people that you need to run your city, where would you be in reality? You certainly wouldn't be talking about the donuts. You'd be talking about something very, 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 very different. So we have to start putting into this thing urban-rural linkages, but the capacity of local government to play its role. The other thing is that partnerships don't just happen. You have to invest in the institutional spaces where partnerships can be found. And those spaces aren't just ad hoc meetings and forums that happen from time to time. You need to put in place, for example, in government, if you're going to have national urban policies, those national urban policies have to be developed on the back of dialogue. And there has to be a dialogue that's institutionalized that brings together all the stakeholders, whether it be the slum dwellers and the private sector, into one room, not only to develop the national urban policy, but to monitor and to evaluate its implementation. So too at the city level. It's not just a question of technocratic planners doing plans for cities. It's about the ownership of those plans. So every city also has to have not only the institutional capacity of local government, they have to have the forums that bring on all the stakeholders together to develop those plans, to own those plans, but also to monitor the plans. And thirdly, because Cities Alliance is about slum dwellers, about the urban poor, in every single informal settlement, we have to have settlement committees that take control over these settlements. Now, I just want to give a few examples of how this actually happens in reality, the circular economy. How the idea that, we don't have to go into Africa, into many of the poor countries in the world and say, well, we need to be, reusing. I've never seen clothes dumped on a dump ever in Africa. Those clothes get to the next generation. They get going all the way until they've been so used, you can say, okay, now you can dump them. They've been reused and reused and reused. Everything is reused. Everything is repaired. So the very notion of the circular economy is embedded in the fact that you have so little money to start with, you better make sure it's maximized. People know how to manage their money in ways in which the rich will never know how. So these are the examples. We have settlements that understand that they live on a river bank because that was the only land that they could gain access to in the urbanization process, because the planning methodologies cannot put land out at the speed in which urbanization takes place. And location for the urban poor is fundamental. And the only land in good locations is normally the unowned land, and that is the flood lines, exactly the worst possible pieces of land. But we have communities that have said, we understand that circumstance, but we will now become the champions of the environment. We will make sure that if there needs to be a relocation, we will renegotiate negotiation ourselves rather than waiting for eviction. So for example, so the point being that the urban poor are not the problem, they are the solution in many parts of the world, and they are demonstrating that in real projects, in things that they understand, not because they say, we want to be, but because we want to be like champions of the circular economy. No, they're saying it because our survival as a community necessitates these type of actions. So just to sum up very quickly, I've been told I have 1 minute, just to sum up that the Cities Alliance, since its inception, since 1999, we were founded under Nelson Mandela's patronage. Since the very first day, we have, without even knowing it, have been working around climate change and the circular economy. Why? Because our very first product has been city development strategies, have been strategies that said, look at your city strategically. That's what it stands for, city development strategies. Look at your city strategically, and that's been at the core of Cities Alliance. And whereas cities in the past have been only trying to deal with short term, we've planted the seed and I don't know how many cities, so hundreds and hundreds of cities around the world, to say, no, you also have to bring the long term, and climate change, circular economy, all about the long term. So at the core of planning that we've introduced has always been these very, very concepts. So though I've run out of time, I understand, but with those words, thank you so much. I'm sorry for someone who's going to close. So from the Cities Alliance perspective, we're very much committed to the circular economy. We're very much committed to the fight against climate change, but doing it always in the interests of the urban poor. Thank you.
That concludes the session. Greg, do you want to say anything?
That was the close.
That was the close.
Thank you to the panel. Thank you to
Thank you.
questions. And can we invite you to just join us for
Wonderful.
lunch?
Thanks for all of those online as well. Thank you.
Yeah, very nice.
It kind of happens more frequently to me that I've been moderated by Real. That was panel and who was the panel?
Oh, thank you so much. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, moderated.
Oh, great. Thank you so much. I had a colleague who also said Megan, yeah, you gave a great presentation as well. So yeah, so I knew a little bit about your work and innovation. So I was yeah, really impressed here again.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Francia.
Again,